Okay, good morning, BTN. First I'll give you guys a little disclosure. Last time I presented, I feel really bad. The last time I presented, I was shoved in because it like snowballed to me, and I just took it. And that's the way this group works, is you help each other out. And then this time I was actually planning it, and then I had a medical procedure yesterday, and I had some other issues in the last couple weeks. And so Paul was supposed to share today too, and he's part of my team, and he got sick. So I'm just gonna wing it. I'm pretty much better when I wing it anyway. It kind of reminds me of when you're trapped out on an island with a client and everything's going bad and you've just got to wing it, and that's what I'm good at usually. But most of you guys have all heard me speak. I've been part of this group. BTN is awesome. I've been part of this group for like 6 years, it seems like. Made it through COVID, the rough years, the very rough years. I can't stand Zooms. I'm just like so allergic to Zooms. Zoom, like looking at a Zoom right now makes me cringe. Like it just reminds me of 2020, 21, of not leaving my house, of not having open houses, of not being able to buy toilet paper, things like that. But anyway, everybody's heard me talk about selling, and I have a phenomenal record. I mean, I'll put my record up against anybody's as far as selling. I have 14 years in this business, and still to this day have not met somebody with my record. My record stands by itself. I've sold everything in one weekend, minus one property, and I've discussed that before. It was June 2020. We pre-listed the property before with the price. June happened, worst real estate market I've ever been a part of. And it was a V-cut recovery. We were at the very bottom, and we couldn't get a loan for it. 1.6, nobody was loaning the money like that. Jumbo loans were cut off. So I'm sitting here on a list and I can't do an open house. I can't get a loan for, but guess what? I still sold it in 3 weeks. So that's my worst listing ever. And so if that's your worst, then I feel like I'm doing pretty damn good. So I'm sick of boring you guys with all my sales. So believe it or not, I purchase homes too. So we're going to talk a little bit today about purchasing. Got a little short story for you. So, well, first off, I want to talk about my team. So part of being a great real estate agent and being able to help people, I can't do it all myself. I have to have access to everything that you need, throughout the escrow process, throughout the qualifying process, throughout the whole process of all the documentation, all the legal stuff, right? He knows all about that. We have a lot of lawyers in this world, and they've written a lot of paperwork. If you have bought in a house lately, we have a whole team that works for the state of California of realtors of lawyers that I can call on anytime, which is nice if I ever get into a jam. But they're the same ones that write up all these documents, and it's endless. But anyway, I have a TC for that. Her name is Stephanie Moya, and there's no way I could get her here. She lives in Arizona, but she works over online for me, and she is absolutely phenomenal. She goes through all my documentations, makes sure all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, we didn't miss any checks in the boxes, and saves me from a lawsuit, and that's what her job is to do. Secondly, I've got a great title rep, I've got a great escrow, and I've got a great lender who's online right now. And without those three, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And that's why I want to talk about purchasing a home. Since I've met Paul, when I came into this group, my business is on the purchasing end, and even on the sales end, has gone up because of the confidence I have in this man to do for me what no other lender has ever been able to do for me. And that's give me the confidence to hand them a client and have that client be happy and us to complete a transaction. So many times I've handed clients off to lenders and they go into the abyss and they just don't ever come back. You call them up and they're like, oh, your lender didn't call me back, or this. It's just horrible. And then you get into a transaction. My very first one, I'll remember this. I was working at Star Real Estate and I went with the lender in the office, and he told me they were qualified, and we wrote an offer, got an accepted, and found out he did his numbers wrong and they weren't qualified. I mean, things like that, you know. So that's my competition out there. That's Paul's competition out there. So anyway, I have this friend. We went through electrical training together. We went through the trade school together through the union and Local 11 in LA, and we've known each other for years. Spent a lot of time together. Known him for about 37 years, and he called me several months ago and wanted to buy a house, but he needs to sell his first. So we've been looking at houses, but we're going to sell his first. He's going to either get an Airbnb, move in with his mom, whatever it's going to take. But these days, you can't have an offer that's contingent on the sale of your house. It just will not get accepted. So I was like, geez, okay, so we're going to sell this house. Okay, so I went over there to look at this house and told them what we needed to do. And they started working on this house. Well, in the meantime, he finds his dream home. It's listed too high. I told him to sit down, just relax. We waited. 3 weeks went by. It was still on the market. So then I called Paul and I said, Paul, how can we get this done? Can this happen? And so they contacted Paul too, and they worked with him. 3 or 4 days later, Paul came up with a plan, a very convoluted plan. I'm going to have Paul try to discuss with you guys. Hopefully he can go through it. I go back to the drawing board and I'm like, what is this house worth? It was listed at $1.4 million. It's right near a golf course in Long Beach. Beautiful home. It's called University Estates. Gorgeous home. Okay, now there's 2 kinds of houses that sell on this market. There's houses that are fixers and there's houses that aren't fixers. This is not a fixer. So there's less competition on the non-fixers. Right now, because of the lack of inventory, developers, investors, I get, no lie, 5 to 10 calls a day from investors wanting me to represent them on anything that I have. So if you're buying a fixer right now, you've got a lot of competition. But this house didn't have a lot of competition, so it was actually easier to purchase. But there's still competition out there. So they said, what should we write an offer for? And I go, so I came up with a number of 1.325. So we wrote up the offer. Before we had it sent over there, they dropped the price on the house, 1.325. I was like, oh, this is destiny, right? So I call the agent. I establish a relationship with her. Turns out her TC is an old friend of mine from Star Real Estate like 14 years ago. I bought, when they sold their house on a short sale, I had bought all their home furnishings from them to save them from having to move them because they were going, it was just a rough time. So we hit it off and wrote the offer and it was accepted. And we went into escrow and we closed 5 days ago. We did a 25-day escrow, and it's very convoluted how we got, I mean, I still can't even wrap my head around how we did this, but I would like Paul to explain that if it's at all possible.
Yeah, absolutely, okay, absolutely. So,
can you be on the screen?
So Steve did a great job of describing the situation, right?
Okay,
and that he wanted to buy the new house while he still had the existing house. So the challenge is, how do you have enough income to qualify for both homes? And the second part, from a lending point of view, is if a lender knows that you're, sometimes they don't want to give you the money on that house, right? They don't want to do that loan. But in this case, that's the challenge, right? And we didn't really have enough income. The client was retired, just based on the income sources alone. However, we found a lender that was willing to take their assets and use them as income. And everybody does that differently. As an example, some lenders might say, okay, we're going to take that asset and divide it by 360, and that's your income, right? Well, in this case, I found a lender that was much more generous, would take that income and divide it by 84 and use that as income. And also was willing to loan on the house, even though they knew we were going to sell that house. And then the second part of that, from a client point of view, is, of course, if he sold his house and bought the new house, he would not have as much of a loan, right? he would have a lower payment and everything. And the interest rates, right? In this case, the interest rate actually was pretty attractive given the situation. I think he got a 699 or 690, which, given that you're doing this kind of loan, was a good deal for that purchase price and that situation. But as soon as Steve sells his house, we're going to do something on his existing home that's called the recast. Does anybody know what a recast is?
Recast.
Yeah, it's where they recast the loan, and then you get a lower payment based off what you still owe on it.
Exactly. So, like, if you think of it like this, if you have a big chunk of money and you give it to the lender and say, hey, I want this to go towards principal, what happens? Nothing happens. Your payment stays the same. It just shortens the length of the loan if you do it that way. But if you do what Jessica was talking about and you do a recast, you give them a chunk of money and you pay usually a nominal fee, and they will adjust the loan. They'll rewrite the note for that lower loan amount and adjust the payment. So in this case, that's his plan. As soon as he sells his house and gets that chunk of money, he'll recast that mortgage. Anyway, that's how we did it, right? Just getting a little creative, of course, and doing all the homework. And I think that's the point, really, the difference between having a successful escrow and not having a successful escrow, or people being pre-approved, quote unquote, or not pre-approved, or whatever you want to call it, is doing the homework up front, making sure that everything's going to work, kind of looking at the details of it, because that's where it all comes down to when you're buying a home, and then providing a smooth transaction for people to get their new home so they don't have to stress about it. Anyway, I think I covered everything. Did I miss anything, Steve?
No, good job. He's sick, so I mean that's amazing that he was able to get all that out of his throat there. He has a sore throat. Good job, Paul. So basically, my client's retired and his wife's retired. He was an electrician through the union. She was a court reporter. They don't have huge retirements, you know. I mean, they're good. They're nice retirements, but they aren't something huge. And to qualify for a loan of that margin on his own home, so he's borrowing against his own home, and then he's borrowing another 1.3 million. He's got two loans, right? Correct?
Yep.
Two loans on a retirement. How did we pull that off? I still don't know. This guy's a magician, you know. I didn't think it could happen, but it did. And Paul and I have been involved in some other ones that were really unique too. And it was on the sales end. It was where I was actually helping somebody purchase a house that I was selling, but they were using a 1031, which means you take money from an investment property and roll it into into the new investment property, but the house hadn't been sold yet. So we did a reverse 1031, which I'd never heard of before till Paul told me about it. And we actually purchased a home with no money. Basically, I don't know how he did it. And then we went and I sold the next one, and we only had a small amount of time. Well, good thing they hired me because I sold it in one day. So we sold it in one day and did a reverse 1031, and they were able to not pay any capital gains, keep their taxes. I mean, it was just phenomenal, and he pulled that one off for me too. So part of having having success is having a good team, and Paul is like my number one teammate. So I appreciate it, Paul. Thanks. Any questions?
I do.
Yes.
So on that recasting, would there have been a better interest rate if that all didn't happen that way, or was that the normal going interest rate at that time?
You're going to pay a lot more for doing what we did. Definitely. Yeah. Right? Correct?
Yes. I mean, it's definitely going to be a little bit more expensive to do what we did. Like, say that I mean, say at that time, probably the going rate for that mortgage might have been, 6.5 or something. Maybe 6.375. So to get 699 and be able to pull off what you want to get your dream home, not so bad, but some more expenses to do it for sure.
Yeah.
But he got the home,
I have a question. Kind of along the same lines, I guess maybe this is more for Paul, but so this whole recasting, I've never heard of it. First time I've heard of it. Is that available for anyone that just has a chunk of money that, wants to try to lower their payment, or is it only available in certain situations, kind of interesting ones like this?
So it really depends upon the individual lender. Usually, if the if the loan amount is lower, almost always you're able to recast the loan, right? If it's a jumbo sized loan, it's lender by lender whether they'll allow you to recast or not.
Got it.
So you really have to call your lender and ask them, hey, do you allow a recast and how does it work? And they'll say, oh, well, yeah, you just tell us the amount and we'll send you a calculation and then send your check to this address with another check for $300 or whatever it is, and we'll recast the loan, which means you're actually signing a note again, but you're not changing the terms of the loan. So if you're on, as an example, if you're on year 23, you'll still be on year 23. It just lowers your payment.
Got it.
Interesting.
I had a question for Paul. You said you found a lender who would take this gentleman's assets and divide them by 360, so that gives him his income. That's all, I'm assuming that's over a 30-year loan. But then you found someone who divided it by 84, so it was a
Correct.
7-year loan?
I'm sorry, can you say that last part again?
So then you found another lender who would take his assets and divide it by 84? So
Correct.
that was just for a 7-year?
Yeah, so just as an example, let's say that somebody had $1 million in assets, right? If I divide $1 million by 360, that's $2,700 a month of income, right? But if I divide $1 million by 84, that's almost $12,000 a month of income. So that's how this particular lender was looking at assets. They would be much more generous with how much income they would give them based on their assets.
And I've heard of them doing it for 15-year, so 100 divided by 180, but
Oh, yeah. So I'm not talking about the term of the loan. It's a 30-year loan that he has. So that's not changing. I'm talking about how they look at his income. Just how they look at his income. Like if you're self-employed, right, they're going to average 2 years tax returns. Or if you've had business for the last 5 years, they'll look at your last year's tax return for your income. But in this case, I'm talking about just the income part. Has nothing to do with what the loan term is going to be.
I see.
It's just based off an asset. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Turn your asset into income.
Yes.
Is it specifically because he was retired?
Yes.
Right.
Because the retirement wasn't enough to cover even one of the loans, let alone two of them. Yeah.
All right, I have a question and a comment, a shout out to both these guys. So the first one is, Steve lives down the street from me and he has sold 2 houses on our street in the last 12 months. Actually, I think 2 houses in the last 8 months.
Probably, yeah.
2 houses. And they don't come up for sale in our neighborhood, but like every 2 to 4 years. Probably closer to 4. I don't know.
Maybe
but-
even farther, yeah.
So that is pretty crazy. So I have a question for Steve and one for Paul. I will start with Paul and I'll come back to Steve. So also shout out to Paul. Paul has sent me out on some loan signings where I've seen some pretty interesting creative deals for people buying investment properties, whether it's some wealthy lady that works for a big 5 consulting company in Laguna Beach, and she's gonna buy the house next door. Remember that one, Paul?
Yeah.
Also, anyway, so Paul is excellent that way. Paul, my question is, one of my biggest financial mistakes in life was I didn't buy another rental property. So, maybe I can redeem myself, but here's the question. Should I be thinking, like, rates are high right now, and I can always refi, most likely, I can refi in another 3 to 4 years. Should I think that way as an investor, or am I being too presumptuous?
I think it's a Paul and a Steve question. I think part of it is, acquiring the property, right? And so right now, and Steve can talk to this, I mean, you're in a better position to acquire the property, because when or / if the rates go down, it's going to be a frenzy to get the property, right?
Stampede again, yeah.
So you'll probably pay a premium to get the property, which will offset any savings on the rate. So what we always say is you date the rate and you marry the property, right? So if the numbers work and you have an investment property where you're at least breaking even, then I would say it's a good gamble, right? Even if the interest rate's a little bit higher, but you can make the numbers work by down payment and high rents and all that, then I would go for it. We can't, of course, guarantee that the rates come down, but it's highly likely that they're going to come down in the near future and that you could refinance.
Okay.
Paul, am I correct on the number? 5 million pre-approved buyers sitting back waiting for the rates to drop? Isn't it that?
There's a lot of pent-up demand.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
There's numbers out there like that. It's pretty scary. If, say, rates drop 1%, eventually, what's going to happen to this market?
So the other part of my question to you, Steve, is you've had, just say, if you look over the last 12 months, you're having a pretty good year, right? You'd say of the last 12 months you've had pretty good. Most other realtors,
No.
they're starving, they're Uber driving, they're doing a lot of other things right now because they've had to, subsidize their income. What do you attribute your success to? Some things. I'm sure it's not one thing.
Yeah. I don't know. It's the strangest thing. I sit and contemplate it all the time because my boss pulls me aside and wants to know what I'm doing right now, because there's people in my office that were top producers doing, 15, 20 deals a year, making double, triple what I was making, are doing one deal. And my boss told me the other day, and this is kind of, I'm letting it go because I got so much on my plate right now, because I was asking him and I said, what is it? And he goes, it's what you did a year ago. He goes, what you succeed at today in real estate is something you did a year ago. And like a year and a half, 2 years ago, I think I worked harder than any real estate agent in the country and only made $60,000. I wrote 55 offers that year. It was complete insanity. I only had 2 listings, and it was so hard to get something accepted. And the year before that, I made quadruple that. Like, I just had like this bad year, so I put in all this work and now it's paying off, It's all
just the
meeting
legwork.
the legwork, meeting people, things like that. Also, I attribute it to another thing is I work. Like, it's a simple thing. Is what do you do? Well, I work. I was going to bring in my lockbox today out of my trunk. It was in my trunk, and I was going to use it as a visual. The thing's brand new and shiny. I've had it 14 years. I don't use that thing. But when you sell your house, Andy, your house, just say, for instance, you sold your house for $1.5 million. So 2.5% of that, it's like $45,000 or something. So you're going to pay a real estate agent to put a sign in your yard and hook a lockbox on your water pipe? $45,000? Doesn't seem legit, does it? That's what you're going to get if you don't hire me. And I'm telling you, that's what you're going to get. I won't say every real estate agent out there, but I'm going to tell you 98% of them, that's what you're going to get. I take clients to see homes, and we never meet the realtor. Never. We meet the lockbox. Are all the lights turned on in the house? No, they're not. So you walk into a dungeon. Are there any candles lit? No, there's not. I mean, it's really embarrassing out there. It really is. These people, they don't show up to inspections. Like I always say, I sold a house in Crestline. I sold a house in Temecula. I sold a house, like three or four houses 1 year, all an hour and a half to 2 hours away. Never used my lockbox. Okay, I had to meet the appraiser, had to meet the inspector, had to sell it, sold every one of them in one day. I mean, it's just, you go out there and you work. I was a contractor, as a lot of you know, and when you're a contractor, you know how to work. So when I moved into real estate, that's what I did. But anyway, what was your question? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
What do you attribute your success to? It's the legwork, so
Yeah.
you know, which
Yeah.
is good.
And good.
And the one final thing I'd like to say is, when I was talking about teams and I got lost here, is I'd like to thank everybody in this room. You guys are all part of my team too, for referrals. I generally don't get a lot of referrals in this group. I've been in this group 6 years. I think I've got 3, maybe 4. I don't know. It's not been a lot. But when I do need you guys, you're there for me. Like Pierre saved me on this house. It was a great house to sell if it was fixed up. Got Pierre. He brought in all you guys as subs, and Aaron was there. Aaron, I owe Aaron dinner still. Aaron pulled something off for me big time. We had the photographer, we had the stager, we had all this stuff that all came down to like, you know, a 24-hour period. He has painters in there like literally hanging cabinets up. Peter's putting handles on the doors in another room. We've got the house cleaners in there, and we pulled this all together, and we sold that house for $140,000 over asking in one day.
Nice.
Or 2 days. So that was a BTM project. That thing was a sober living home that you didn't want to touch the walls when you walked in.
I
Okay?
saw the before.
Yeah.
And I can attest, I did all the cleaning.
Yeah, there was a 1/4 inch of film on all the cabinet doors, and she cleaned them all off. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
disgusting.
It looked so good afterwards. It was so nice and shiny.
I was just so excited. I did a YouTube video of the paint job
Yeah.
with me, and I posted it.
And that was the same one that Aaron we talked about last week. Went out there with his worker, and they took 2 spray cans, and they're doing this on the roof, covering up white spots on the ceiling, because it's the first thing you see when you put on the
Asphalt
roof.
shingles.
On the roof, yeah. First thing you pull in is the roof is over the garage, and that's the first thing you see.
Yeah.
And it was like all splotchy. Yeah,
Spotty.
yeah,
Little faux magic
yeah.
with Rust-Oleum.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I love how Steve does his business, and that is why I had approached him about joining Remax, and luckily he agreed. And so I've had the pleasure to work with him the last
Yeah.
month and a half, and it's been wonderful.
I haven't had a chance, and also Jessica, I wouldn't call her part of my team. She's, you know, she's independent, but she's been helping me out recently, and we work really well together. And she's super excellent. She's like excellent at doing the technology end of it, making flyers, putting them together, doing all this stuff that I'm not good at. Maybe because it's of youth, I don't know what it is, but I'm not good at that. And I pay a marketing guy a lot of money to do that. And then she's doing stuff that almost looks better, and I'm like, "Whoa, that's crazy." So, so anyway,
One other comment that, you know, I've been to several broker previews and all that stuff over the last few years, and I met a lot of the loan reps and all that, and most of them are with the big banks and everything, and it's super refreshing to have a guy like Paul in our group who is way more creative, way more conscientious, because the big banks people, you either fit their little qualification parameters, they're really hardcore cookie cutter, you know, nothing creative like what Paul works with. So
yeah, going to Paul is like going to I don't know, like a car dealership that carries every car on the lot, every brand known to man, because he's got all the stuff. He's got all the packages, he's got all the lenders, and he's got great
multi-line dealer.
Yeah, he is. He's got great relationships with all of them, and they do what he says. I mean, it's amazing what he can pull off. And the deal we were talking about earlier, where we did the reverse 1031, he had 2 loans running simultaneously for 30 days, literally side by side, in case one didn't work. Is that awesome or what? I mean, so you have 2 options. And obviously there was a better one. If it didn't work, we had a backup. We were gonna close. We had 2 side by side. I've never heard of that in my life, you know. So it was awesome.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yep.
All right.